And I believe Vincenzo Crea is out there somewhere as well. There he is.
Poi non presente, ma devo nominare Jasmine Mattei, giusto?
Not in Berlin, but I'd like to
Credo che ci siano già delle domande.
mention Jasmine Mattei as well. So I believe there are some questions, are there not? Good morning. I'm Irene from Spain. First of all, congratulations. This was an absolutely lovely and very innovative film. It's an amazing first feature. Really magnificent. I really, really liked it. And I've got a question for the director. Where and how did you come up with this idea of having this very innovative approach of having this more pop twist to the music alongside the classical music?
Ma è iniziato tutto perché io vengo dalla musica.
Well, first and foremost, my background is in music. I'm a singer-songwriter.
Mi veniva sempre chiesto quando un singolo, quando c'era un disco.
And people often said to me when a new single came out or a new record,
qualcosa sulla musica,
even before they asked me something about the music, they asked me, well, what do you think about women in the world of music today? That was always the question wherever I went. And I said, well, I need to look into that a little bit, as a matter of fact. And so I took a look at all of the female composers from the 16th century to the 19th century, and in the late 18th century there was a perfect setting. There was a lot of choral formats then as well, and very few people know about these kind of institutions and structures. Nobody knows about what really happened there. There's very little research, and so I can choose any music I like in a sense. It's a film that talks about imagination, their incredible imagination and their very profound expression of themselves. And so that's why I put in this music. I decided I could have present-day music as well. We'll never know what kind of music they were playing, as a matter of fact.
Good morning. Thank you for the beautiful film. It's very watchable and rewatchable, I would say. My question is to Margherita and maybe to the whole team. How did, first to Margherita, how did the music background helped, or vice versa, maybe you while doing the film, because you know what you're writing about, you know what you're shooting about like a professional, so you do not have to maybe research that much or invent something. So how it influenced you, you're being a musician yourself, and also while writing and while performing, how did you manage to create this very subtle mix of drama and comedy, because it's very funny and it's very profoundly touching at the same way, not like every movie can manage these two together. Thank you.
Allora, riguardo alla prima domanda.
Well, as to the first question, I do indeed have a musical background. My producer, Davide Pavanella, is there, the co-writer. Co-writer of the music, as I was saying, and all of the music had this very cinematographic pop. We enjoy adding all kinds of performative elements to the music that we make. It's pop music, but it's got this very performative part with lots of actors and so on. So we worked together on the music for the film with Davide Pavanello, and we managed to add this pop twist to it, because that pop is part of my work as a singer-songwriter, and so we put that into the film. And what was the second question? I've already forgotten it. Yes, as to the sound. Well, the sound, of course, depends, and the tonality depends upon the choice of the actors as well. Now, there's some directors who mix all kinds of different levels and all kinds of registers as well, and I prefer it when 1 minute you're laughing, the next minute you're crying. You think that people are doing well, and then the next moment they're having a hard time. That's what you can do with this kind of tonality, and performance range as well. I'd like to thank Paolo, who was very generous with me. and has this comic aura around him as well, yet at the same time, he is an actor who can play magnificently in every kind of genre.
Forse qualcuna delle attrici vuole dire...
Perhaps one of the other actors want to say something about the tonality of it, about the writing, about the screenplay, the tone that we struck. Well, yes, we thought to think about the tone when we were writing the screenplay. We wanted something which would be entertaining as well. We wanted to have a touch of lightness to all of this. They're light-hearted, they're young, adolescents, some a little older, and they have this energy. They want to get out of this place. And that was the direction we started to move in. And all of the crew did a fantastic job. Charlie's got the dramatic role. Yes, Carlotta, go ahead. You play the most dramatic figure in this film. We really worked together. We had a small group of all the girls, and that was very helpful to work as a team in a sense. Because don't forget, in the film, these are girls who've lived together since they were children. They lived together very closely as if they were sisters. Of course, right at the outset, it wasn't quite the same for us on the set, but I think that these close links were the things that helped me the most. I felt really at home. I felt comfortable with the girls I was on set with. And I play this rather dramatic figure. It's certainly true. But maybe the others have something to say as well.
Hello. Very beautiful, feel-good film, one of the best, I would say, until now for this year. First of all, I'd like to address a question to the filmmaker. In my opinion, you try to mix and combine from one era to the other, and this you are doing through music, through the use of music, modern music towards music of the early 19th century. But I wanted to know if you find a way to conduct with the magical realist aspect of your film. There is a magical realist aspect in your film, and I would definitely like to speak to me a little bit more about that. And secondly, as for the actors, how much they feel through improvisation in their work, in the film, in their acting, that truly speaking, they project the face of one single woman of that era, with all these 4 or 5 different faces. Thank you.
Allora, rispetto alla prima domanda, poi...
Let's start off with the first question, and maybe we'll get the second question repeated afterwards. So magic realism was the question. You asked about the magic realist element of my approach. It was very philological. Let me explain what I mean. And we looked into the Baroque composers. We looked at these traditional instruments. There are violins made with the kind of catgut string that was used back then. Maddalena Laura Sirman is the late 18th century orphan who we have records about, and we only have records of her because she was married to a musician. So it was very carefully researched, and that was the only basis that we could take for a foundation. That is the foundation stone for the rest of our flights of imagination. There's the creation of these girls, and their musical imagination runs wild. Perhaps there's magical realism in that music. And as to genre definitions, I'm not so strict about those. I can imagine what you're getting at when you refer to magical realism, but it's really about creativity and imagination. So there's something magic in that because it's something that comes from within us.
The other question...
Sì, ha chiesto come siamo riuscite a...
And the other question, I believe, was about how there were so many of us, and it was almost as if there was just one face that we were representing, of one person. Now, I just wanted to say that there's not just the 4 of us, there's also Galatea Bellucci, who can't be here with us today, playing Teresa.
è con lei che ci risveglia e ci dà la
She's
forza di
the one as well who wakes us up and gives us the energy
sentire una musica diversa
to do something different, to listen to a kind of different music as well. It's a great shame that Galatea can't be with us today. There's 4 of us. There were actually 5, weren't there? Maybe you want to add something.
Buongiorno, guten Tag.
Good morning.
Credo che come avviene nella vita le persone siano
I think that just like in real life,
tutto e molto di più, quindi hanno dentro
people
di sé
really are
diversi livelli,
all kinds of different things. They have a whole host of different levels and complexity within them.
Per quanto ci riguarda corale, no?
And this is a film which is a bit like a choir with lots of different voices, all very different but driven by the same urgency, the same desire. We all express that in different ways. Perhaps because we suffered different things in our backstories. We also look in very different ways at the events that are unfolding around us. So the figure of Galatea, in a sense, wakes up something within us which looked as if it had fallen fast asleep. Some have got a bit of a twinkle in their eye, still others find that that twinkle has somewhat gone out. That's the case, in a way, for my character at the beginning. But with these different notes and harmonies, we move in the same direction. Perhaps you wanted to add something?
Volevo aggiungere in realtà quello che poi ha detto Veronica.
I wanted to add a few words to what Veronica said.
Riunite in realtà, diciamo che sono già un gruppo.
These girls come together, they're already a group right from the very beginning of the film. And then Galatea's character joins them.
Come dire, forse anche questo volto comune che per fortuna,
and perhaps it's this shared face, the face of the group, which you saw. We managed to give this shared countenance. That's partly due to their friendship, which is really deep-rooted right from the start of the film and goes deeper and deeper. There's scope to dream up a different future, a different universe for themselves. They're bold enough to do that. That's the most beautiful thing about it, that they have the courage to do that. And perhaps it's partly because of the place where they are as well. They've been in this location for their entire life, most of them at least. That unites them, but they're also united by music. They play day in and day out. Music making is an escape route for them as well, but it's also something which really is their very own. It's their very own thing in this very oppressive context. So all of those elements played a role.
Prego.
Good morning. First of all, thank you for the film. My question is about your topics in the film and the way you explore them. So you explore very important topics, which is inequality, patriarchy, abuse of power by the powerful, and even the ownership of means of production by the powerful and stripping them from the people who actually own them. And you set your film in the beginning of the 19th century. I understand that there is a specific story as well there about the religious institutions, which you might have wanted to put there, but also the music element, which contrasts the conservative ideas and progressive ideas. It plays very well in that sense. I was interested also if there were other reasons you decided to travel in time and set it in that particular period. Thank you.
No, sicuramente ci sono state altre esperienze, sono sempre esistite le artiste donne.
There have always been women making music. They're often in courts. And so their social status was somewhat ambiguous. They could be artists, singers, composers, whereas in mainstream society, women weren't allowed to do that. And there needs to be a degree of freedom, of course, in social terms, to be accepted as a female artist. certainly back in history. So you have these women quite often who don't fit in to the standard stereotypes. They're free within the framework of a court, for example, which is a protected context. But what I found striking in these orphanages in Venice is that it was the exact opposite. Prudenza actually isn't an orphan as such. She has a father, but she has been closed up inside this orphanage. She said, I'd prefer to be a nun in these kind of very specific institutions. They date from the 15th century, 16th century, 17th century, and they came to a real peak in the 18th century with Vivaldi. So the idea is that they were desperate to continue playing, and so they went into these semi-religious institutions, which also allowed them to play music. That was a sort of escape route. It was just lovely, just too beautiful as a setting, and there's so many strata of history. I read heaps of history books, and you could have 12 seasons of a series on this. There were heaps and heaps of stories. So I took little bits and things from here and there. Lucia del Violin, for example, their surnames came from the violin. There were the girls from rich families who ended up inside these institutions, which were semi-religious orphanages. And at the end of the day, they said, well, actually, we can play the music that we really want to play, is what I said to myself. And I picked this modern piano, moving towards romanticism, moving away from the traditional older instruments. And now an orchestra can play the part of an entire piano. There's all this dynamism of the interior world that's reflected in a piano as well. Veronica playing, it's quite striking because they don't just find a way to make their own music and to experiment. Carlotta is more devoted to the 18th century. Those are more modern, but they sing, and she wants to start singing again. And she's a fantastic singer-songwriter, by the way, and a great performer. And she said, well, Veronica is going to have to sing, and the song that she sings in the film is one that she wrote herself. It's maybe 3 years old? 2018, actually. I loved that song, and I said, well, I have to find a way to get that into the film, because after all, it's a way of expressing herself through music and through her voice very deeply. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful film. It's a real masterpiece. You're so young and you made such a masterpiece. So well done, you. And I, years ago, when I was 20, worked at the Church of Sant'Ignazio in Rome. Anyway, my question is also for Paolo Rossi. I saw Paolo Rossi in Milan when he was just starting out. All those things you were doing back then, I remember it well. And I wanted to ask you, was it hard for you to play the role of the bad priest?
Vieni Paolo, vieni.
Facendo un percorso mi sono dimenticato la domanda.
I've forgotten the question on the way up here. Oh yeah, the bad priest, yes. No, it wasn't hard at all.
No, anche perché io ho avuto occasione così di sfogarmi contro di loro.
That gave me a chance to get cross with all of them while we were working. That's why they wouldn't let me come up here, because I gave them such a hard time, you know? I really felt I was in a minority, as a matter of fact. But no. I didn't mind being the bad priest at all. I've got a comedian background, after all. I'm a comic actor. There's a certain kind of comic actor who works, in a sense, with the dark side of themselves, the tragic part of themselves and of life. And so I drew on that part, but true comic actors and true comedians are linked to clowns. That's the real starting point. They play with violence and they perform violence so that it doesn't actually find expression in other ways within life.
Ti ricordi, dicevi che era lo spettacolo più fatto al mondo, era lo spettacolo con più repliche al mondo.
You were talking about some theatre play you were in where there were so many lines. Well, yeah, Mass, after all, is a perfect dramaturgical setup. It's a kind of setup, stand-up comedy, as they call it nowadays. Because, of course, you have to have the priest who has to stick to the script, but at certain points, the priest can improvise as well. And improvising is my hallmark, it's what I'm really good at. And so I improvise. That's what I do. Perfect priest, there you go.
Ragazze, posso rimanere qui?
Girls, can I stay up here? Well, yes, okay, as you asked so nicely. There's a question at the back.
Freelancer. I would like to ask the director a question. While your story is based in reality, it's largely fictitious, with all the young women in the end happily driving off into the sunset, so to speak. And it basically continues a modification of the patriarchal myth that there would have been no female artists, no female composers. And this modification is there have been female composers, but we don't know anything about them and we don't know their works, which is not true. For example, as you might know, the first opera ever produced outside Italy was written by a woman. And even I know that, and I'm really not an educated person. So why not tell people, look, there have been those specific women, they did exist, and we do know their works. It's not true that we would not know anything about them and had just a vague idea that there might have existed somebody. Wouldn't that have been a much more powerful message than to tell the opposite, which, as I say again, is not true?
No, well, sono esistite, ma se tu
Yes, they did indeed exist, but if you say Ludwig, everybody knows who we're talking about. If you say Wolfgang, everybody knows who we're talking about. You just need the first name, not even the surname. If you say Francesca Caccini of Mantova, nobody knows who she was nowadays, but way back then she was very famous. And so I'm trying to say that, as a matter of fact, there were indeed some such composers who were known at the time, but now they're not well known. Some people don't even know that these kind of institutions existed back then. Vivaldi had 300 girls or so there was an orchestra of 300 girls. He was at La Pietà for 40 years, and many of Vivaldi's works seem to have drawn, or may have drawn, on compositions written by the girls. You said it would have been better to be more historical, so perhaps it would have been better, you were saying, I think, to talk about the women who really did exist, but who are they? Where are they? This is more of a fable than a historical film as such. And when you have a fable, you need to start from a solid foundation, but talk more about the idea of creativity and not about specific creative women, with specific biographical details. I don't know. I think that if I'm talking more about a concept than about an individual person. I think you can talk about more female artists at the end of the day. And to be frank, there are some, but really just a handful, and nobody knows who they are. So I thought it was better to have a film about people who are completely unknown. There were so many women who were completely unknown, and just a few out of millions who were successful. I'm looking at you because it was you who wrote it with me. Maybe you have something to add. Well, yes, we did actually wonder about exactly that. When we started doing our research, we picked out a few female figures. I mean, but there were so many of them. There were lots and lots of them, actually, at the time. We were fascinated by these specific kinds of institution, these orphan girls who didn't have families to support them, and they were outstanding musicians, but they were concealed, hidden away. It's all a question of imagination. It's not supposed to be a precise historical document. It's more of a concept, the concept of female creativity, which had more trouble in breaking through. It's obvious that it existed and that these women existed as well. There were great opera singers, for example. When it comes to female composers, they had a hard time. And I wanted to talk about all of those female composers who have been hidden in the annals of history. Unfortunately, there were a few who were successful. On creativity,
proposito di creatività femminile, io sono molto interessato.
On female creativity, I really wanted to know how you worked together with the screenwriter. When you were writing, were you already thinking of the music? Was the music written hand in hand with the screenplay, or did it come later? How exactly did you do it? There's lots of repertoire pieces. For example, there's Vivaldi pieces in the film, which we already had in fairly early on. We already had some specific scenes in mind, and we wove the narrative and plot line around that. We said, this has to be in there. Well, yes, we started working on the sound and the writing hand in hand, in a sense. So I would say that we really worked in parallel. And of course, it developed with the music. I went to and fro between Turin, where my producer is, and came back, and we really tried it out. We did a bit of an acid test. We'd write a scene and say, there's a duo there. So I would get on the train, went to Turin, and we get to work on the music, and then come back and see how it could work, and then we'd go back to the screenplay. So we had music, we had my co-music composer and the screenwriter. We went back and forth on the train. It was a triangle in a sense. Thank you. We've got time for one last question.
Beautiful film. Thank you very much. For me, this was also a film about female empowerment and female friendships, especially, that create this female empowerment in the end. How important was that for you, and why is it still important to tell these stories of female empowerment, even nowadays? I mean, the film plays in a past time, but why do we still need these films, and why was it important for you to tell the story?
Credo che questo sia il periodo giusto per sottolineare ancora.
I think we're in the very right moment to absolutely underline this. Women are in the spotlight.
Sul tema del nuovo femminismo,
with new feminism as well. And maybe I can hand over to the other actor, because there's the scene at the end where they talk about the gentleness and support between the women, right at the very end, the final dialogue. I hate it when women are bitchy with each other and bitter with each other. That's really outdated. We're from a generation where envy between women is really obsolete and outmoded. This is a film about female empowerment and female friendship, and Maria Vittoria Dell'Asta really embodied that. Well, yes, there's this disarming sincerity about themselves and their feelings, and between themselves as well. My character in the film, who's the youngest in the group, she's the one who's always ready to pick up on new things and try out new things. She's always full of enthusiasm, bursting with vitality. And there is this female solidarity in them right from the outset. There's this sense of creativity. And that comes bubbling up through their link, through their friendship. My character sometimes seems to be acting a bit out of line, but she's never afraid to say what she's thinking, even if it's mistaken, erroneous, even if she's not quite hit the mark, because there is the strength of the group. They stand shoulder to shoulder and say, let's draw on what we have within us and create something together. There is this union that makes them strong, and it was also there on set in artistic terms between us as well, so it was really crucial and central to this film. We played characters, but after our days on the set, we also had a great mood, a great link between us. Thank you very much for your magnificent film. Thank you to Margherita Vicario and to the entire team. Thank you to all of you.